without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to this Scottish Tech Army panel. It's called Agile Charities, Stories from Lockdown. And I'm delighted that we've got some key individuals from organisations across Scotland that have been using digital transformation, not only as an emergency response to COVID, but as an enduring change in the way they do things. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Ashley Scotland, Chief Executive of Thriving Survivors. I'd like to introduce you to Robin McPherson from the Robert Gordon's College in Aberdeen. I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Lees, the Chief Enterprise of Young Enterprise Scotland.
Hi.
And I'd like to introduce you to Cameron Butchart, an STA volunteer. Thank you all for your time this afternoon. So Ashley, if I could start with you. As a Chief Executive of Thriving Survivors, an organisation that supports people through trauma, can you tell us a little bit about the digital survivals toolkit that you've developed?
Sure. So the digital survival packs, essentially they contain an internet connection, a digital device, and also a full comprehensive package of support. So it's about, for us, connecting people with a purpose, and I'll always come back to that. It's great to give people devices and it's great to get them connected, but without that reason as to why we connect and that wider purpose, for us, that was what we tried to address. So from the creation of this support package, if you like, has grown a full support program where people can speak to each other every day. We've brought together over 60 strangers so far, and they've just came together. They teach each other new skills, they share YouTube videos, and they've really taught each other how to use these devices. So we just give the foundations and we've let them build it, and it's been really quite fantastic to watch.
Fantastic. And I'm guessing that some of these people may not have had experience of using digital tools in the past.
That's right. So, do you know, some people get them and they sat in the box for a week before we were actually able to pick up that conversation and say, so let's get it unboxed and actually see what you've got in front of you. How do I switch it on? Where's the on button? It's like, okay, so you take people through that process. But yeah, we were working with people who were, sorry, my dog's barking like mad in the background.
That's understandable in this time of COVID.
Sorry, it'll stop in a minute. So I'm terribly sorry, he's completely thrown me.
It's okay. I can move on to Jeff. Jeff, your organisation was affected, like many organisations, with your services being delivered in a different way and through digital transformation. Can you tell us about that journey and how you went around the change that you've made in the organisation and how that's come about?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. You know, our key audience, the people that we work with, are young people, and those young people are based in primary, secondary and tertiary education. And pretty much from the 23rd of March last year, the doors were shut. Young people were sent home to learn to study from home in a very different way. And as much as our organisation had a very strong strategic plan that included a digital strategy within there to progress, it's pretty much been a fast forward on an old VHS videotape for us through into very ultra modern online learning, and technology playing a huge part in that. So it wasn't that it wasn't in the plans, it's just been a bit like that fast forward button at a very fast pace. And it was through the support of the Scottish Tech Army and Cameron Butchart, who's on the call, and about 4 or 5 others, colleagues of his who volunteered with the STA. It was through them that we were able to work our way through that process. Because I think, if I'm being quite frank, we'd have probably still been muddling around, wondering what we should do, when we should do it, why we should do it. Whereas by working with Cameron, we had something that gave us a focal point the STA gave us the tools and resources in terms of the people to support that. And I always remember something that either Cameron or one of his colleagues said. You know, he was very strong. You don't know what you don't know, and having those experts round about us who had a better idea as to what solutions might be out there that were suitable to us was a real advantage to us at that time.
Fantastic, Jeff. I think that brings us on nicely to Cameron. You're a volunteer in the STA, and you joined the STA when you were on furlough from Edinburgh Airport. Can you tell us a little bit about what the work you did with Jeff and his team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we had a team of about 5, didn't we, Jeff?
Yeah,
it was in there. Yeah. So we came in and we initially had a wee look at kind of like, well, how will Young Enterprise Scotland kind of reach out to their kind of their customer base, as they say, or their clients. And as we kind of went into that in a bit more depth, we kind of unfolded a few other kind of points that, you know, for improvements, and we kind of helped Young Enterprise Scotland kind of overcome them and put steps in place on how to implement these changes and essentially transform their digital online presence.
Fantastic. And Robin, you've been on a digital transformation in terms of your teaching and the delivery of that teaching of computer science. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, there's 2 dimensions to this, really, Mark. It's how did we as a school and actually the wider sector of education respond to the pandemic, and then what do we do next? One of my concerns is that we've done so much to innovate in the past year across the whole sector that, all being well, schools will come back in August and it'll look a lot more normal. And I think that impetus to keep on working with the technology and developing it really well might fall off a cliff a little bit. And we've made some gains so far, but we're still a long way short of being really fully fluent in digital pedagogy. So that transformation needs to keep moving forward. So that's one of the things that was uppermost in my mind when we started talking about launching an online school, which we'll be doing later on this month, ideally. And we really started looking at the future of computing science, because my feeling is that education, along with many other sectors, was not ready for this at all. And if you see what's happened with the SQA and assessment, then that could have been avoided if we'd been much more proactive about embracing technology in education. I was having conversations more than 10 years ago about the day will come when assessment all goes online, but in the meantime everyone just thought, no, exams have got a place and handwriting has a place. And if we'd really been faster to think about the possibility of technology and assessment, we wouldn't have had the problems that we've had in the last year. So it's been a bit like turning around an oil tanker, but we have learned very quickly. And I was interested right from the get-go in what I was seeing in the very first weeks of the first lockdown was that most teachers didn't like this, but some did and were very good at it naturally. And likewise for the children, most of them found this very difficult, but some actually preferred it, in fact, to school. So by looking at the work being done by those kids and those teachers, then how can we create a future school that can actually really help us combat digital poverty and the digital divide? The school I'm in, we've got a very wide catchment area because we're an independent school. So we've got lots of kids coming from rural areas where Wi-Fi is a problem. We've got a wide range of pupils because we have a high number of bursaries. So not everyone has the access to tech at home, but we have one-to-one devices. So that was helpful. But it was very difficult to try and make sure that everyone could access learning all the time. And I think we've seen real strides in that because most people have invested in technology in some way because that's the way the world works. So that's created some of the infrastructure that we were naturally lacking. So we've had some conversations with the STA and with Mark Logan as well, looking at his review last summer, saying education is the start of the pipeline, but we are very short in Scotland on computing science graduates, and that's a big issue. And if you look at the numbers of kids who are actually sitting computing science at National 5 and at higher, over the last 5 years, it's dropped about 20%. And the Logan Review basically says that we need to talk about computing science in the same way that we do physics, chemistry, biology. So that's what we're hoping to do, is to put it on that level. And the only way to do that, in the absence of the graduates really, is to have a national school and online school, because most schools are not offering it because there's not enough uptake from the kids, which means they're not going to go looking for teachers, which means we get the circular problem. If we have a national school where we can have teachers who are able to teach anyone in Scotland computing science, we can change that in the long term, and that really is something that has got very exciting potential.
That sounds like a massive digital transformation, and like any change, some people may be hesitant or resistant to that type of change. Are you seeing that this is a welcome transformation, this idea that you're suggesting?
It's a great question. So the reaction from people in industry has been overwhelmingly positive, because we've gone to companies, and the reaction from the Scottish Tech Army was brilliant. The initial first thought was that actually this is really welcome, and how can we support you? And without that support, I don't think we'd be anywhere close to launching anything at all. We needed that industry expertise. But it's that conversation between education and industry that needs to take place, because a lot of people we spoke to said that we've tried to get this kind of thing off the ground in the past and always been frustrated by officialdom. So that's where we need to kind of break through that and make sure that one of the big things we take out of the pandemic is long-lasting, sustainable change. I don't want this to be like the banking crisis. The credit crunch led to no reform of the banking sector, and it's still fairly vulnerable, I would say, not being a banking expert, but we didn't see the complete shift that we should have done with that. So we can't do that with technology and the pandemic. We've got to make sure that we come out on the other side and life is very different, and that we can transform society for the better through engaging effectively with technology.
I think that's a very good point, the transformation that didn't come out of the banking sector. But I think there have been some developments in currencies after 2018, especially online digital currencies. But Ashley, just thinking about your own work and the challenges you faced in getting access to technology, in getting access to funding, are there any challenges that you'd highlight to us that might need addressed going forward if we are to maintain the pace of digital change or even increase it?
I think the Connecting Scotland have been wonderful in connecting people and getting devices out, and we certainly have tapped into that support after creating our own digital pack. So we went to them, but there's a lot of people going for it. We're all going for the same amount of devices, so there's only certain amounts in each allocated area. So for Glasgow, I think there was 9,000 kits to be delivered. There's so many more people in Glasgow. If you weigh that up, it's not proportionate. But then you've also got that every charity is trying to do the same thing right now, and that's connecting the people that they work with, whether that be schools or whatever shape that happens to take. But for sure, there needs to be more resources and more funding made available, because there is funding out there, but it's very small pots of funding to do website design or whatever that happens to be, sort of your service redevelopment. But when you're looking at actually delivering a project like I set up at scale, that's going to take a lot of money, and that's going to take a lot of funds. But I also believe that it's not for one organisation to do. I think there is something in the collective. We as an organisation can't possibly connect everybody with a purpose on our own. We need people like Jeff and the Scottish Tech Army, and we need as many people involved in that conversation and indeed that collective effort as possible. So funding is an issue, but I feel if there was organisations willing to come together with a very cohesive plan on how to deliver this in its entirety, then I think that would make a big difference.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ashley, and I think what I'm hearing is that Robin's calling for more access to technology and the tools to enable that technical change, that delivery. But it's the same tools that you're needing for your project. So we shouldn't actually be competing with each other in terms of the physical resources that we need. I wonder, Jeff, do you think there is an opportunity for greater collaboration between organisations that seek this digital transformation, so that we're not in a competitive situation, but more in a collaborative situation that Ashley's and Robin's highlighted?
I think you make a very good point, Mark. The words I had written down there were hashtag collaboration. That's only one word, hashtag collaboration. As well, Ashley was talking there. And if I speak from our perspective at Young Enterprise Scotland, we don't go into any project flying solo. We recognise where our strengths are, and we recognise that we can bring our sandwiches to the picnic, but if somebody else brings the cakes and somebody brings the juice along, then the picnic is going to be far greater for the people attending. And it's about us all playing a part in that. And I think the other point to make is that, the availability of tech and the software and the hardware is great, and that will happen. But what we also need to make sure is that all people, and particularly starting in the area that we work with, young people, is that we make sure that we give them the mindset that gives them the confidence to be able to get involved and do something. And we need to be very cautious about not keeping the balance correct between the value that the tech will bring, but without that appropriate mindset and the meta skills attached to that young person, the tech will be useless. It will be absolutely useless. And if you think of what Ashley's achieved with her organisation, and many other organisations have achieved, entrepreneurial leaders in the third sector, there are many organisations that have not had success because they've not had that mindset within the leadership or the teams throughout that organisation. And I think there's this bigger role to play in terms of ensuring that enterprising mindset, that entrepreneurial mindset is developed in people alongside that. And you would expect me to say that, Mark, working for an organisation that has enterprise in the name, but
absolutely.
Mark Logan would say exactly the same. I'm pretty sure.
And I was listening to a presentation by Mark Logan just earlier, and I was about to say he said exactly the same thing. But Cameron, if I come to you, from your experience in working with third sector organisations, as well as the technology, do you think there's other skills and other opportunities to share learning?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few organisations that I had volunteered for last year through the STA, and it wasn't just like kind of tech skills that they were requiring; they were also requiring some business mindset, skill set, kind of to almost take their organisation to the next level, and kind of transform that from a business and a technology perspective. So, yeah, absolutely. I think what we provided as an STA last year was just absolutely fantastic. And I think that we could do more acceleration with more organisations like what we did with Young Enterprise Scotland, by kind of helping some business development stuff and technology as well.
That's a very good point. And certainly the Scottish Tech Army was created around a COVID response, but it certainly plans to be an enduring organisation going forward. Robin, I'm just conscious of time, and I thought I might just let you close off with your final thoughts on where you think we need more support from. You mentioned Mark Logan's report around educational reform. Where do you think that additional support could come from?
That's a really good question. If I can come back to actually something that Jeff said just a moment ago as well, and endorse that, is the significance of entrepreneurship and how important that is to build into the education system. And we're definitely making progress with that. But the interesting thing I found that when we talk to a lot of different people in different companies about, we said we've got this idea, we're going to teach computing science and maths, and we're going to develop our own modules as well that go beyond the SQA curriculum to, what skills do you want to see in there? And they said, look, it's fine to get people who know their maths and their computing science and they can code, but do they actually have any of those interpersonal and soft skills that come from just actually coming up with a business plan and executing it? And that's where entrepreneurship is the final module we're putting in place to tie together this whole thing as a diploma. So actually it's about partnerships. I think if our idea had stayed strictly within the realms of education, it probably wouldn't have happened. And I think going forward, that's a big message for Education Scotland and the SQA to take on board, is they actually need to talk more widely and consult more widely, outside of their immediate realm of education, to find out what the future of Scotland is really about. And I think that Logan Review is such an important document, and it gives us actually a lot of really clear ideas that we can take forward. And it's basically incumbent on all of us to work together to make sure that happens.
Well, thank you very much, lady and gentlemen. What we're going to do is we're going to hand it now over to a Q&A session. So what we'll do is we'll take the first question, please.